Welcome to Cocktail Hour. I'm Andy.
And I'm the rep.
Well, good evening, and welcome to episode 26.
Is this 26 now? I can never keep it straight anymore.
I had to actually go to our website and look. Because I got so tired of sounding like the big dumbass. You know, like, what episode is this? So I'm like, you know what? Let's do a little homework. Yeah, and let's look it up. So I looked it up.
Wow. Okay, wow, 26.
At 26. And knowing that it's, bi-monthly, that's quite a lot.
Yeah, that's like 13 months.
Wow.
I'm good at math.
Well, thank God somebody is.
I'm good at the maths.
So tonight's drink is the Cosmopolitan, which was suggested by our author guest, who we will introduce in a few minutes. But I gotta say, the recipe that I found, the drink tastes and looks like what a pink twatini would be. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and our pink twatini looked like it was...
Should have been a Cosmo.
The wrong time of the month.
Right, yeah. It's like they were like the reverse. But, it's alcohol. It's good. I've had two. I'm not slurring yet, though, so that's good.
I'm still sipping on my first one. I told my wife that I wanted another one delivered in 30 minutes, and I'm not going to repeat what she said.
She probably said, "Bitch, get your own."
Yeah, it was along those lines. Yeah,
I love it. That's excellent.
You should make your own picture right up front and just have it beside you like we do in New Orleans.
Yeah,
I didn't want it to get too warm, though, and then I didn't want the ice to, if I had ice in it. See, what I should have done is put the shaker in an ice bucket and brought that in.
Exactly. Well, now you know for next time.
There you go.
Mm-hmm.
All right, good.
All right, so let's introduce our author guest. She grew up in Ocean Springs, Mississippi. And she currently lives in New Orleans, and actually she works and lives in the part of the city that was not devastated by Katrina, I guess where the edge of the water stopped, I guess would be more appropriately said. She's got several books out. She writes the Micky Knight series. Which would
Yay!
Be like,
Sorry.
It's like I'm trying not to give it away, so I'm like stopping and starting. Okay, so she also, by the way, received a Lambda Literary Award for her third book in the Micky Knight series, The Intersection of Law and Desire, and it is our privilege to introduce to you J.M. Redmann.
Hello.
Hello.
Yay.
Hello.
Yeah, let me just, one thing is that actually where my house is where the water stopped. Literally, when I came back here, the cars in the street had water lines on them, but my house was okay. However, where I work was actually flooded to 11 feet.
Wow.
Yeah, and our office on the 5th floor was not damaged, but the building itself was not in usable condition we moved back in the March after.
Wow, that's a hell of a long...
Yeah, the executive director opened up his house. I was working out of my house, and we had a satellite office in the French Quarter Marigny area that I also worked out of. So it was sort of just catch as catch can. And then, interestingly enough, or not so interesting enough, in June there was a major electrical fire in the building, so we had to be out for another 3 months. Oh, and so at that point we said, it doesn't matter. Yeah, hell, high water, fires. All we need now is a plague of locusts, and we can deal with that.
A plague of locusts.
It could happen.
It could. But let's hope it doesn't.
Yeah, yes.
Yeah, no, why? Oh, so we thought we would chat about, primarily talk about the Micky Knight series.
Yeah, since it's mainly what I've written.
Yeah, and I was really amazed to see that your books have been translated into 4 different languages, aside from English. English didn't count. German, Spanish, Norwegian, and Dutch. I'm like, will you go, girl? Damn.
I know, and people say, well, I really think your language should be translated into bloody blood. I'm like, I have no control over it. I had a friend of mine who kept saying, they should be in Spanish, they should be in Spanish. And I'm like, you know what? A publisher has to want to do that, and then they have to be able to afford to do that, and then they have to choose to do that. So it's not like I can go out and say, hey, I'd really like to be in Norwegian or something like that. It's just that somebody in those countries found the books and liked them. The freakiest thing is that I do have a short story that was translated into Korean.
No kidding.
Wow.
Yeah, which is really kind of weird. It's like, what, which of these characters is actually my name? In German, at least I can't read, other than to say, Dunkel Hefeweiss when I'm at the bar, which is dark beer. German, so I can see my name, and then, of course, all these words around it that I don't really quite understand. But in Korean, it's like, I haven't a clue. This could be someone else's entire story, and I would just never know.
Yeah.
I wanted to. One of our listeners actually asked a question about that, so I'd like to put this out here, and I think you've pretty much already answered it. But Charlie, who lives in Germany, wanted us to ask. She said, Death by the Riverside was one of the first lesbian books I read. Only I read it as Mississippi translated into German. Can you ask her if she had any influence on the translation? Because frankly, the German version sucks compared to the original.
Oh, wow.
Wow. Well, and I've heard the opposite. I've heard from friends of mine who speak German that it was a very good translation. So it could be that translation is in the eye of the reader. And, and it's one of those things that I realized when working through this, because things like in German, everything's gendered. And so it was like, I had a judge in a scene, and I specifically didn't, put a gender to it. My German translator had to say, which do you want it to be? And things like, and a friend of mine worked as a translator, and she called me up one day and said, look, I have some questions. It wasn't my book even. It's like, trees. What's the equivalent of, Spanish moss and live oak in Germany? What's the equivalent of, someone was wearing something like a moo-moo? They don't have moo-moos in Germany. Of course they wouldn't, because they're more sensible than that. But how do you translate that kind of stuff? And it made me very much appreciate what a translator does. It's not just, you pick that word that means the exact same thing, because that doesn't happen.
No, it's there's so much culture behind the language that it would be really interesting. I'd be interested to to follow up with Charlie, and since she's read both, find out what the differences were. Why did she think that? Maybe we can get her to follow up. The questions on our Goodreads group, so maybe she'll post a response for us there.
Okay.
I do have a bunch more questions, but we can do those later.
Okay. Well, this is you guys asked me to do this, so I'm in your hands, so to speak.
Aww.
At a long distance.
Oh, well, that's okay. We can work with that.
Yeah, we can work with that. You'd be surprised what we can work with.
I expected you would.
Okay, so, all right, I have a question. Now, you probably answered this question 100 times, so please forgive me for asking it, but what inspired you to write the Micky Knight series?
Oh, good Lord, you bitch. Sorry, just a joke. Yay, it's you. I was the audience. That is a joke. We were talking about using foul language beforehand, so I just had to get it in early. What inspired me to write the Micky Knight books? Oh, boy. It's one of those things I realized that I wrote the first book in 1988, so we're talking a long time ago, and it's almost like I wasn't, who that person was, who I am now, just, it's like, oh, yeah, I vaguely remember that. But what happened was, that at that time is you were having this huge sort of churn in particularly mysteries that I was aware of. Sarah Paretsky, Sue Grafton, Marcia Muller. Suddenly they were taking these icons, the male icons, and saying, wait a second, you boys, the women can play there too. Mm-hmm. We can have strong women who carry guns and who walk the mean streets. And I thought, oh yeah, I really like this. And I was like, I want to read a lesbian. And I kept saying, I can't find any lesbian really hardcore. I mean, there were a few. It was, Barbara Wilson and Catherine Forrest, of course, Sarah Dreyer, but the iconic private detective that just wasn't really out there. And so I said, well, let me maybe I should write one. And it really was just doing it as a fun exercise.
Yeah.
I thought that maybe I would write it, maybe a few of my friends would like it, and that'd be about it. And it just kind of snowballed from there.
Wow.
Before we go any further, we should probably, for folks that haven't read your book or your books, give a little bit of insight into who Micky Knight is. And I just want to say right up front that I know that there are 6 books right now, and you've got another one coming out soon, right?
Yes, in April.
Excellent. So right now we've got 6 books that take us more than a decade, I believe, right? About a decade?
Yeah, at least a good decade. I've been really kind of vague about time. You know, in the first 4 books, I wrote them in sort of a very vague now. And of course, you go back and reid them, particularly the early ones, and they are dated by technology because back in the late 80s and early 90s, you know, a cell phone weighed about 50 pounds. And, you know, laptop computers didn't exist. The web was just barely beginning. You know, you had to do all those DOS commands. So email, we didn't connect by email. But I was writing about that particular time. And so you look back at it and see it now. And I very deliberately tried not to tie the books to specific, you know, I didn't mention elections. I didn't mention anything, the news that would tie it. And, you know, and of course then history tripped me up because after Katrina, that changed. Of course, when you write about New Orleans, you have to write about Katrina.
Yeah.
And so suddenly I was writing the last 2 books, Death of a Dying Man and Watermark, have all been very definitely set in a particular time and particularly history. And actually, because I ended up having to do a lot more historical research. I mean, even though I live in New Orleans and I lived through Katrina, it was, okay, I have all these characters, and I can't just use my particular story to encompass everything that would have happened to them. And so I really had to do a lot more research to make sure that I got all the Katrina facts right.
Okay. So Micky Knight essentially is a private investigator who has a tight group of friends, and it's hard to kind of even give some type of an overview. She's
a private eye. And she came to be private eye because she really felt she didn't fit very well in the typical 9-to-5 business type stuff, and she really wanted to be independent and on her own. And as you read the books, you hopefully get the backstory. And that's one of the reasons I started to write about it, where I had to come back and think, okay, what kind of woman would choose to carry a gun and sort of snoop into people's business and have a job that really, you have a lot of independence, you have a lot of sort of autonomy, but you also are oftentimes, particularly if you work in a single person agency like she does, you're alone a lot. You know, you're keeping the world at a distance. And who is this person? And how do I create, you know, who she is and how she relates to the world? And for me, you know, this is taking one of the icons of American literature, which of course is the outsider who searches for justice and doesn't always find it, but oftentimes walks the proverbial mean streets, the mean bayous, however you want to call it. And for me, what interests me is how do imperfect people, and my character is very imperfect, how do we search for justice? How do we try and do the right thing? And that's kind of what drives me to write the books.
And she is very, very damaged and imperfect.
Yeah.
Yes, she is. And like I said, I made that deliberate, and I made those deliberate decisions because, again, you know, what kind of person does this? And it came to me, okay, there are going to be problems. And, you know, I think some of my choices that I made was a little bit of a reaction because I think I'd read some books in which some woman hadn't been able to love and yada, yada, yada because she broke up with a girlfriend 5 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I remember really going, no. You don't become an isolated, you know, sort of not trusting, not willing to scared of intimacy because you had a girlfriend and you broke up. I mean, that's just life.
Yeah.
And Micky is definitely, I mean, there are some very serious reasons why she is the way she is.
Yeah.
You know, and something that someone else had said is, we learn as each book progresses. We get more and more of Micky's backstory, and it really helps us to understand why she's doing what it is, and also this being Micky is you do Micky in a first person.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I love about these books is we really get such an intimate insight into her and her psyche, and we don't necessarily agree with a lot of what she does or the choices that she makes, but we understand them, and her friends in general are just so hard on her.
Again, we get her viewpoint. We're in her head. They cannot be any more than we can be in our other friends' heads. And there's a particular attention readers give to a book, because you're sitting there with that book, you're with that character, as opposed to those of the rest of us living our lives. We go to work, we have to go to grocery, all this sort of stuff. So her friends are living in that kind of world. So I didn't perceive them so much as being hard on her as giving her more of a needed kick in the butt.
Yeah, over and over and over. But it's
well,
but
I think the only one that I didn't, Joanne and Ellie and Alex and some of the other folks, they are at least able to kind of cut her some slack and recognize when she's working hard to make a change. But for Danny just can't seem to let go.
Yeah. Actually, I would say that Joanne's harder on her than Danny. But perceptions. When I write the books, I put them out there. And I don't have to give away too many spoilers, but she and Danny had lived together and they had an affair. They were lovers, and Micky just wasn't ready to deal with it. So in a way, Micky hurt Danny more than she hurt any of her other friends.
Absolutely. Yeah, I totally agree with that.
Yeah, but there comes a point when you have to say, "Oh, Jesus, I'm over it. Let's move on."
Yeah.
And you don't.
But when you're writing books, you want dramatic conflict.
Well,
so
I got that. I think some of the funniest about dramatic conflict. I know it doesn't really seem appropriate, but I can't help but put this in here. When Micky just didn't want to have to deal with her friends, and they came in her house, and she was hiding under the sofa, and they were drinking her booze and talking about her, talking about dramatic conflicts.
But it's also, let's face it, when you're writing first person and you want to find out what they're thinking and things that they wouldn't tell that first person, you have to come up with some things like hiding under the couch.
Oh God, that was fucking hilarious. I got this vision of her under that sofa, just listening to these people that are her friends talking about her and drinking her stash. I just laughed the whole time.
That was definitely a unique way to get some additional information.
And Jean didn't do any head hopping with her writing. Yay!
Let me think. Andy, do you have anything that you want to? Because I don't want to. Because I do tend to hog the stuff here.
Yeah. I like how gritty these stories are. I like how flawed these characters are. I like that there's not necessarily always a happily ever after. And Micky can get herself into some of the most oddest situations. I mean, being chained up in a house in a basement by killers, having to hang out on a roof, hoping that the two Bobos outside, the killers that came back to the house, don't see her. She's hanging on for dear life on a roof. I mean, it's just, she gets in some of the oddest situations, and you're just like, it's like a roller coaster ride when you read these books. You just never know what's gonna happen.
Being drunk, trying to dispose of a bomb.
Yeah.
That was good.
Yeah.
Well, there are conventions to the genres, and obviously I'm writing mystery. I'm writing a hard-boiled lesbian crime novels, the detective on the mean streets, and so of course there is that kind of element of violence and running into bad characters and that sort of stuff. And that said, that part of what I'm doing is creating a story that's going to keep people interested, and that way I can sort of get the rest of what I want to to do onto the pages. If you're interested and you want to find out how does she get off the roof, even though she's drunk as a skunk and she discovers that, oh my God, she's about to be blown up, what does she do? Then I think, that, to me, some of that, how do people deal with these situations? And admittedly some of it's convention, and if you look at 7 books, you sort of go, wait a second, how many times has she been in situations like this? So I do, within the realm of the conventions, try and keep it somewhat realistic. If she gets hit, it hurts. There's no Energizer Bunny bounce back up after that. And first, I think one book she ends up in the hospital for a while because she got hurt pretty badly, and that's just the reality of it. And that she says many times that that's not what she does. That I've tried to make it clear that there's a gap of time between these books, so it's not like she's running around shooting people and going after bad guys all the time. A lot of what she does is what private detectives do, which is they read through piles of records. They go, they just go talk to people. They ask questions. They do all this sort of stuff, and that's most of what she does. And every once in a while, something just gets dropped in her lap, and these are the times that I feel like, okay, this is going to be the interesting one, it's the one I'm going to write about.
I did notice in the first book, you alluded to Micky having martial arts training, but I think she used some kind of a kick once, and then I don't think you've ever talked about it again.
It was mentioned again in the second, in the very beginning of the second book, when you're discussing how she's recovering from the gunshot wound. But yeah, other than that, I mean, there's really, she doesn't seem to be able to defend herself very well. She seems to get hurt a lot.
Yeah, she does.
Well, actually, okay, the truth is, actually, at the time, I don't train anymore, but at the time I actually had a brown belt in karate. So one of the things that I really learned is don't ever fight unless you have to. Because most of the time someone's going to get hurt, and it could well be you. That there's absolutely no guarantee you could be, black belt in karate. Actually, I was sparring one time with this guy who was like third degree black belt, whatever. And it was light sparring, but I managed to get a roundhouse kick into his solar plexus and put him down on the ground.
Dang.
Yeah, and it taught me, first of all you need is one good blow, and B, it's not so much. You can train a lot, but a lot of it really is luck and stuff. If someone gets you at the wrong angle, if they have the surprise on you, if they have a gun, you can't punch your way out of a gunshots. Again, I've tried to make her that she's not going to fight unless she really has to. And I know at one point I had to do what's called an elbow strike, and I know I've had to do some hammer fists and stuff. So you guys are probably reading for the sex scenes and skipped over those.
Hey, now come on. Or maybe I didn't recognize.
Really that transparent.
Well, maybe I didn't recognize that, a hammer strike would have been a martial arts. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it could have just been, boxing.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I wanted to. Okay, so I've read all of the books a while ago, and then I went back and I've been rereading them. I'm into Lost Daughters right now, but the one that I always come back to is Intersection of Law and Desire. Yeah. And I know that you did a reading here in Milwaukee, and I talked to you about it a little bit then. But that book is just incredible to me. The anguish that Micky goes through while trying to solve this case, and the withdrawal, how she withdraws from everyone. I don't know. It's such a difficult read, but it's so well done. It's so well done.
It's a dark book, yes.
Yeah, I mean they're all kind. I mean they all have some degree of darkness to them and harshness, but and I don't know if it's just my personal experiences dealing with child abuse or what. But I mean, do you get a lot of feedback about that particular book, or is it just me?
I've had I've seen comments, I've had people that come up and say to me, I read the book once, it was a great book, I don't think I can read it again. And it was, I intended it to be a fairly dark book. I intended it to be a book that dealt with some very complicated issues, and particularly the issue of how much things that happen to us early in our life still can carry through and carry the resonances and can carry the pain and damage that we don't ever really get away from who we've been, but we learn ways to better carry it and to be to deal with things on a different level. And one of the inspirations for that book actually came when a friend of mine, we were I think someplace we didn't live, that on vacation or whatever, and we were in a bookstore, and she handed me a book and said, "Would you mind going and buying this book for me?" And it was a book about incest. And this was a woman in her 30s, but still in a place that she would never see these people again, presumably. She still felt so damaged by what had happened to her as a child that she couldn't buy a book.
Yeah, where I think one of the hardest things, the whole thing was very difficult, but one of the things that touched me a lot was Micky's guilt that she carried for what her cousin did, because and I've that's something that I've come across talking with survivors many times, and that just so much of what was in there just rang true. But yeah, so I just wanted to mention that. And okay, I have a huge spoiler. So if you haven't read Intersection of Law and Desire, walk away for a few minutes or fast forward. Okay, because I want to talk about this is I'm giving away the end of the book. Okay, so turn off your stuff if you don't want to hear. Okay, so I wanted to ask you about Barbara's boyfriend, because he worked at the school. He was from New Jersey. And was that just a red herring? Because I'm certain that he's involved.
Yeah, no, it's just a red herring.
It was just too coincidental. There was just too much stuff.
Hence the red herring.
Yeah.
All right, then.
All right.
It's fine.
I gotta say, every Micky Knight book I read is my favorite until the next one, and Watermark is no exception. I really, really love that story, and I feel really, really bad for that teenage kid. Wow.
Yeah.
Ugh.
Yeah. Well, again, I write really hardcore. Bad things happen.
Yep.
And I try not to be too out of the box. I try not to, some of these things, it's like I read a newspaper story and saw that things like that happened.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like, okay, well, I can change this a little bit, tweak it here and there, but still incorporate it into the book.
Yeah. Oof.
Yeah, and a lot of what I was doing with Watermark is because it takes place almost immediately after Katrina.
Mm-hmm.
And I had been down to part of it takes place in the lower Ninth Ward, which is the part of the section of New Orleans that there's what they call the Industrial Canal, which kind of cuts New Orleans in two. It goes from the lake to the river. Mm-hmm. And there's what they call the lower part and the upper Ninth Ward. Well, the lower Ninth Ward was where it was really the levees just crushed, and a huge onslaught of water came rushing through there. And I remember going down there afterwards, and the houses, it just looked like, some drunken god had just, ripped his hands across the whole landscape, that houses were halfway canted onto the street, cars upside down into trees. It was just, because this had been, fairly poor area, mostly shotgun homes, one story type stuff, mm-hmm. and the water had taken away everything. Mm-hmm. And at some point I thought, oh my God, having part of a mystery take place there during the immediate aftermath of Katrina, when there was no power, there were no lights, and particularly trying to convey to people what it's like to be in a city that is doesn't have the things that we think of as normal. I used to joke that, because I go visit people in other places and be like, oh, wow, cool, your stoplights all work.
Oh, God.
Yeah. I mean, for a long time, the stoplights here just didn't work. There were no stoplights. They had little stop signs on these tripods at the intersections. And, of course, there weren't that many cars because people were still not coming back. But, it's like, oh, my God, they got a stoplight working. Things like all these things that we become accustomed to, and suddenly New Orleans did not have them.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask another question that one of the listeners had posted. When did you know what was going to happen between Mickey and Cordelia in Death of a Dying Man? She says, for example, J.K. Rowling had all the Harry Potter books plotted out before starting the first one. Was this all part of the plan all along, or more of an aha moment? Here's something that'll really throw a wrench into their relationship. And then she says, I asked because the signs were all there for this to happen. As shocking as it was, it's believable.
Yeah. Obviously, I've had usually the next couple books or two plotted by the time I'm finished with a book. I can't say that I had the whole thing plotted out. And even if I had, certainly I didn't plot out Katrina and what happened. Mm-hmm. And so, obviously, even if I had plotted things out, I would have had to change what had happened. Because I wrote Death of a Dying Man. I had half the book done when the hurricane hit. Wow. And it suddenly became, I can't write this story about a city that no longer exists. And so I had the choice, do I sort of pretend that this happened in 2004, and so none of the hurricane happened? But it would be hard to do that with the consciousness of people so, inundated with New Orleans and what had happened here. And so I felt like, okay, well, what would have happened to my characters if this is how they were living their lives, this was what's going on, and then suddenly Katrina happened? And how do I transmogrify that book? So I do try, and I think that particular little plot point, I kind of knew that was going to happen at some point.
Yeah, I think maybe some of the foreshadowing that the listener was referring to, and maybe not, I don't know for sure, but Cordelia was always very, very insecure about her own body, and and then also very adamant about monogamy and things like that, and you can, if you look, you can see it.
Yeah. Well, it's a combination of things that we all have our foibles and stuff. In any relationship, that by the time you've been with that person for a year or two, you understand that they are not that absolute person you fell so madly in love with that you thought was perfect. And you realize they're not perfect, but then I'm not either. And this is a really good person, and she has some quirks, but, it's okay. And finding that, and these are some of Cordelia's quirks. And the thing is, what kind of circumstances? And I tend to think it's not so much who we are, it's who we are and what's happening to us at that time. And for monogamy, I think a lot of times people are monogamous because they never ever are tried. No one ever tries to make them not monogamous. And what would happen to somebody who was insecure, who got that kind of affirmation, and had been through this sort of stuff? And so for me, it's like, was it set up? Did I think it would happen? Not initially. This was just sort of who Cordelia was and where she fell along the spectrum. But it certainly kind of started to open that door. And so when some circumstances happened, then it became much more possible.
Andy?
No, I'm just thinking because I couldn't finish that book. I only think, I didn't want to talk about this one.
No, I just meant in general. Did you have anything? I wasn't trying to.
I figured. Obviously, I figured out what happened in that story by reading Watermark, and I understand how things like that do happen. That's like real life. It just does.
Let me just say this. One of my little pet peeves are the lesbian couples who meet and then everything's perfect forever after.
Oh, you know what? Rev and I were talking about that before we started recording this show, before you came on. It's like,
but mine is.
You lie.
Yeah.
Bullshit. I'm calling bullshit.
Let's talk to your wife about that.
Mm-hmm.
She would agree, I'm sure. If she was here, she would agree. But I'm sorry, she's busy right now.
And not making your drink.
She is busy not making my drink.
Yeah, perfect. She just won't make you a Cosmo. Okay. My partner would make me a Cosmo.
Oh, well.
What are you going to do?
I do want to say that I wouldn't want to be a patient at Cordelia's clinic. They seem to die a lot.
Oh, yeah, no lie. Holy crap. And then the building goes, First the patients, then the building.
Okay. Well, first of all, these books don't happen within 6 months of each other. They happen over a fair amount of time. People didn't actually die. Did they die in her building? I don't think anyone actually died in her building. They were killed after.
No, yeah. No, I just mean in general. You got at least 2 books where she's got people who have been there, go there, or something there. Yeah, and you have to remember, I'm reading Lost Daughters right now, so.
Wasn't there somebody dead in the basement?
That was in
that body was found there, but but the basement's, it's in a building the clinic's part of, so the clinic isn't everything in the building. That
was all the Catholics' fault.
Yeah, anyway. The nuns did it. Those damn penguins.
Yeah, those bad nuns. I mean, that's the problem with writing a mystery series is how do you avoid the Jessica Fletcher? Everyone in Camp Cove is going to die at some point. You know that, except for Jessica.
Right? You don't ever want to be her friend.
No, you certainly don't want to be the guest star.
Yeah, no lie.
Because either you did it or you're dead.
Or you're dead, right? Exactly.
One way or the other, you're fucked.
Yeah.
You're fucked over.
Well, I have probably used up all my let's involve Cordelia and the people she's at her clinic. Well, at the clinic at this point hasn't been rebuilt, so it's not even an issue.
No, now she's on the hospital.
The one I'm in, they had this is the new clinic. It's the serial killer again who's killing the lesbians.
Yeah, but that's still the pre-Katrina clinic. Her clinic got washed away.
Yeah. Well, they lost. So she's actually going to have 3 clinics. Because the first one got there was
one that got, yes. Let's just give away all the endings.
Just so you know, most of our listeners read the books before they listen to the show.
Yeah. Actually, yeah, they do.
They do, and So they know us well enough to know that if you're going to listen, and we warned early on.
Yeah.
That there were spoilers. Yeah.
We always have spoilers.
The thing is, how do you talk about books and say, we can only talk about the first chapter?
Yeah, right.
And you're talking about 6 books here, so. There's a lot of overlapping stuff.
That's right.
Right.
Mm-hmm. So what's there were quite a few questions from the Goodreads group. Did you got through what? A couple of them, right?
That was a couple. Let me see. Then we kind of touched on. Megan had a question. Says, as the series progresses, we learn more about Micky's childhood, and I'm curious how fleshed out Micky's past was when Redmann wrote Death by the Riverside, and if she foresaw a long series when she wrote the first, or did she intend to write one and maybe the sequel so Micky gets a full happy ending. It says in the first book we get a bit about her mother leaving when she was 5 and then going to live with Greta, stuff with Bayard, but these are expanded in the rest of the books, and when I read them there aren't any things presented in later books that seem like they were made up on the spot to fit the current plot.
Well, certainly when as a writer, when I create that particular fictional universe, then I kind of have to live in it. It's like, at times I think, why did I name her girlfriend Cordelia? Why couldn't I have had her have a much shorter name? It would have been so much more easier to type. But, but it's I created that fictional world, and then it's like, who are these people? And I felt I certainly gave Micky enough of a backstory that I don't need to throw in much more. That you can always have a few little things that are part of what happened. And I certainly felt the first 3 books, or almost. If you read them carefully, you get that they take place over just about a year. Mm-hmm. And they're much more, I think they're more tied together than some of the subsequent books.
Yeah, then the 4th book starts at their 3rd anniversary.
Yeah.
And then if I remember correctly, they're together like almost 10 years, like a decade.
Yeah.
By the time the 5th one starts, right?
Right, yes. Yeah, so we have skipped some years. There have been some years where, everyone at Cordelia's clinic has done fine.
I'm surprised anybody wants to come back to Cordelia's clinic, quite frankly.
Yeah.
Just saying.
But 5 years of perfect health.
Well, after that, there's time. It's time for something. It's time to shake things up.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. Exactly.
So I wanted to. I had actually planned. Both of us had planned on reading the anthology, which I don't have pulled up in front of me. It's Women on the Mean Streets. Is that what it is?
Yeah, Women of the Mean Streets Lesbian Noir.
And there's some really good authors in there. But I got so caught up in trying to reread your series that I just didn't have time to get to that. So did you want to talk about that at all?
I can do a little bit. This is kind of my first really anthology. I've done editing in the past, which I kind of like to do, but this is the first anthology because Greg Hare and I, who is a gay mystery writer here, lives in New Orleans. We're actually friends, and we see each other on a fairly regular basis because actually he works at the same agency that I do, and he's also my personal trainer.
Okay, I saw you had mentioned him in the acknowledgments in the.
Yeah. And he's actually going to be editing me, and so I figured it works out. He's my personal trainer, he's my editor, but I can fire him. So nice. It's a perfect balance of power.
Yeah.
But anyway, so he at some point said, "All right, would you be interested in sort of co-editing this with me?" And really, he did most of the work on the guys because there's two of them. There's Men of the Mean Streets, gay noir, and then Women of the Mean Streets, lesbian noir. And so he had a lot of friends, and he was the contact to remember the short story by Laura Lippman, and actually asked her if she would contribute that, and she was like, "Fine, yeah." So that's how we got Laura Lippman. And then a lot of the others are people that I just know. I mean, it's a small world of lesbian mystery, so we all know each other. We all have great blackmail pictures.
That's awesome. Nice.
Awesome.
Yeah, and there is actually, I did do, interestingly enough, that seemed that New Orleans kind of seemed to be the heart of it because Allie Valley contributed a story.
Saw that.
Yeah, early on. I, of course, felt that I needed a Micky Knight story because hopefully people that like Micky Knight will read the anthology just to get that story. So it was a few more sales there. Diane Anderson also had a story that starts in New Orleans. So, it felt like, okay, well, which was, I didn't plan it at all. I didn't ask anyone to write about New Orleans. It just sort of happened that way. But yeah, I was blessed with a bunch of really good writers, and I asked them to do stories, and they said, sure.
Now, Allie's, she's not writing about Cain, is she?
Yes, she is. She's writing, it's early Cain story.
Oh, I got to buy that now.
Yeah.
Oh, I want to buy it for Micky Knight. Oh, excuse me, sorry.
Yeah, right.
Where's the guests?
Yeah.
Well, no, it's like, but that was like, it closed the deal. You know what I'm saying? Micky Knight and Cain, come on. How could you not buy that book? I'm sorry.
Yeah, we have to say that Andy's got, Cain is, the be-all, end-all for Andy.
Yeah.
Okay, that tells us a lot about Andy.
I'm just saying.
Yes.
It does, doesn't it? It's so sad.
So, what can you tell us about the next Mickey book?
Yeah, spill.
Oh, good Lord. Well, the next, I've actually just finished the manuscript, and I'm in the editing process. So it takes place just probably about a year or two after. It's a couple years later. A couple years have passed from Watermark. Okay. And so Mickey gets a couple cases that kind of end up intersecting.
Again.
That's,
Does Carmen get released? I'd like to choke her neck, that Carmen.
Yeah, no, she's going to be in jail for a while.
Thank God.
Yeah.
I got all worked out on Carmen. Oh, Lordy. I was like, oh, that woman. She needs a large Marge. Kick her ass.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm sure she's not having a good time, so that makes you feel any better.
Little budding sociopath.
Yeah, I wrote her as a sociopath, definitely.
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember a whole hell of a lot from that one. I remember bits and pieces, and yeah.
Well, it's now Andy's favorite one, so maybe you should reread it.
It is. It's my favorite.
I'm working my way through the series. See, I have this neuroses that I wanted to skip Lost Daughters on my reread cycle and read Death of a Dying Man and then into Watermark, and I got a couple pages into Death of a Dying Man, and I could not control my urge to go back and read Lost Daughters. I can't skip.
Okay. Well, that's not a bad thing.
It kind of is.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well. Yeah.
It can hold me up.
If Cosmos can't get you to skip a book, then nothing can.
Maybe I can spend some time on Lindsay's couch.
Yeah, you go right ahead and do that.
Oh, that's too funny. You wish.
No one's allowed to do that either.
Yeah, no. And I just finished Watermark, about 4 days ago. So it's fairly fresh. I mean, as fresh as anything can be in my head.
Yeah, you read it probably more recently than I have.
Ah.
Yeah, so you may remember things I don't. Because believe me, I do not remember every single thing I did in every single book.
Well, that makes sense, though.
I remember in Watermark that I was much more interested in the personal relationship. I think between Micky and Cordelia, the mystery to me seemed pretty easily solved. Like I knew who the bad chick was. Mm-hmm. Almost immediately. Do you get that? Have you heard that from other folks? Or
no, you're the only person that's ever said that to me.
Are you on my leg? I've only just had the one drink. Be nice. Thank God Colette Moody's not on this show too.
Oh my God! Right? You want I should email her see if she wants to come on?
No.
If they do, most people have not come to me and said, "Oh, by the way, that was so easy, I saw it." 2 pages in, I knew who did it. Either they've been kind, or I have fooled them, but so far, people have not.
I didn't mean to be rude. I didn't mean to be mean or unkind.
Oh, yes, you did, you bitch.
Oh, yeah. That's what I'm talking about.
And it's always a struggle because I really, really do want to play fair with my readers. I hate that, and I read the note, and then I know everything I needed to know. It's like, well, what's in the note? And so I really do try, and what Micky sees and what Micky gets to figure out who did it is there for the reader to figure out, too.
Yeah.
So that makes it easier.
It didn't... I usually figure stuff out very early in the book, so it wasn't... I didn't feel bad about it or anything like that, and there's so much in all of your books, regardless if I'm able to figure it out pretty quick or not. It doesn't take away, honestly, from my enjoyment of it.
Yeah, that is true. Yeah.
So, I don't think of it as, it was a crappy book because I figured it out. Not at all. I loved Watermark. Mm-hmm. I absolutely loved it. So I definitely don't mean that as any type of an insult. I don't always read your books for the mystery, though.
Yeah. And I do write mysteries, and that sometimes it's and. Yes, I probably bring in more stuff than a lot of mysteries about the people's backstory and things, but to me, that's kind of, again, it's what's interesting is how do flawed people search for justice, and I think that's what Micky does, and I think that's what mysteries are about, is how do we search for justice, and sometimes, we make it very easy because, it's just a puzzle that people solve, and whoever died really doesn't matter, and other mystery writers write books, I think, that are much more complex than that who dies is a real person, and how do you reorder this world, and that's sort of more where I'm trying to go for, is that it's a messy world. Micky's not disconnected from the rest of the outside world. She does have these connections and friends and, is trying for relationships. And so how does she intermix all that with what she's doing as a detective and her search to try and figure out what went wrong and how can I fix it?
I like the way you say that when you're talking about, how they deal with searching for justice, how to get justice, because that really is, the readers, we feel, that's, at least I'll speak for me, I feel Micky's inner battles,
Yeah.
When she fails at something, it's not just like, oh, well, fuck it, I'm just going to move on. She really, whether it's in her best interest or not, and that's, you can feel that that's exactly what she's searching for. She wants justice for the folks that are disregarded by society or unprotected, the powerless. Not that she's some kind of great crusader or anything like that, but she is in her own way.
Yeah. Yeah, there was one of the lines from Lost Daughters, and it was one of the characters says, well, we never had a happy childhood is the thing we search for the most. And I think that's what drives Mickey is she didn't have that sense of fairness and justice for a good part of her childhood.
Mm-hmm.
And so how does she find it? In some ways, she's fighting for herself, but she's fighting for other people as well.
Mm-hmm. And in doing that that's all part of her fight for herself too, through those people that she's fighting for.
Yeah. Well, that was the thing with Lost Daughters is because it was about not only the fact that she was dealing with her abuse, and one of the reasons I decided to do that was, again, I've read a lot of books where it was never ever the main character. It was never the heroine who was the one who had been abused. It was always her best friend, her sister. It was always somebody else. And it felt to me that there's this myth that if you're really the hero, it doesn't happen to you. And I wanted to say, no, that's not true. And so that's why I very deliberately made the choice that it did happen to her.
It gives her a lot of compassion.
Yeah. Well, it gives her a lot of compassion. It also gives her, it really, having gone through that, and then, I think it explains, I hope it explains, it's what I tried to do with Intersection of Law and Desire, was to explain why would she do the things she does. Because she does some pretty things that you look at and go, are you sure you want to do this? This is dangerous. But because of that compulsion, that's why she had to do it. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now that we've depressed everybody out there. But,
I need another drink.
Yeah.
Yeah, you need both.
Well, yeah, you need a lot more drinks.
I need more drinks now.
Well, I've also tried to make Mickey occasionally funny, because I think she's a very smart character, and she has a very sardonic, sort of sarcastic view of the world. So I hope that it's not just all, relentless, dark gloom, whatever, that she can come up with some pretty good one-liners that I wish I could come up with at that time, but I never can. It always takes 2 or 3 days later and a few rewrites to come up with them.
You mean somebody else has that problem besides me?
Mm-hmm.
Oh my hell! Yeah, she does. I really like her sense of humor. And I was saying to Reb before we got on the show, I'm like, you think Jean has a sense of humor? I'm like, oh yeah, she must, because there's some really good one-liners in those stories. Yeah. So yeah. Her humor definitely comes out.
One of the things that I think sets you apart from a lot of I don't want to get in trouble, but
you write calling you a bitch. Okay.
Yeah, you write really smart.
Yes.
You don't write down to the reader. I had to look up several words in each book,
what?
And I'm not ashamed to admit that at all. Mickey is a smart person, and you write her that way. I mean, she's got a degree in philosophy. She's well read. She's a smart person, and I love that you use language that reflects that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, again, I want her to be a smart person. I want these to be complex cases, and the kind of cases a smart person's going to be able to deal with. And, and I try and make sure she doesn't do the really stupid things. Because, sometimes you read books and it's like, what were you thinking going to the grave, in the middle of the night without your cell phone? And you're gone.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, and I hate... I try to avoid. I mean, I can't promise that I did every single time, but I try and avoid those. I need this to happen in the book, so I'm going to have my characters just behave in ways that aren't who they are, or they would do something stupid. So I really wanted to make Mickey smart. I wanted to make this about a really smart person who is damaged, but because I think that sometimes, being a smart person, it may make the damage worse, but it also gives you the tools to maybe start trying to repair it and understand what's going on in a way that if you're not smart, and you don't have insight, that you're not going to be able to do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I didn't know I needed that many big words.
No, maybe I'm just dumb.
Nah.
I'm sure that couldn't possibly be.
No, and it probably is in relation to how many cocktails you've had that day. Just saying.
I hadn't considered that. That might be part of it.
That could be part of it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I don't have anything else. I mean, without going into just, talking about even more specifics of each book, but...
or crack out some of the highlights we did on some of these stories where you'd laughed your ass off, or something that took you totally by surprise. I mean, I did a lot of highlighting when I was reading Watermark. Really enjoyed it.
Do you have anything that you wanted to share specifically?
No. Mm-mm.
Okay. Jean, did you have anything else you wanted to talk about?
I actually do have a funny story called The Intersection of Camp and St. Mary, which are two streets that actually do intersect here in New Orleans. And it's about a mystery writer whose best friend wants her to solve a mystery. And it's in, I think, Women of Mystery, edited by Catherine Forrest. So if people want to check out and see if I can really be funny, then they can look for that short story.
Oh, nice.
Women of Mystery, edited by,
Catherine Forrest, yeah.
Okay.
I don't know if it's still in print or not, but, what can I say? I have no control over that.
I'll see if I can find a link. Our next guest is Q. Kelly, who wrote Strange Bedfellows. She's got a new book coming out. I believe it comes out right on the 15th, so be sure and tune in.
Yay.
We are going to be recording early, so if you have questions or comments you want to send in, you can do that, but just realize that we're going to be recording on the 8th. So I read Strange Bedfellows already. I enjoyed it a lot, so
you're going to give it away? What the hell?
Damn
Come on
it.
now.
What?
What, are you going to give it away early? What the hell?
Oh, I didn't hate the damn book, so you don't need to bother doing that. I'm sorry.
We're doing the review right now. Oh, my God. Okay.
I don't think that was really a review,
Right. Buy the damn book.
I take it back. I didn't like it.
Oh, God, stop.
Well, we're going to be doing a book giveaway, so you'll want to tune in for that so you can get the details on the damn book giveaway.
Yep.
Is that enthusiasm? Goddamn book giveaway.
Damn book
giveaway. Get the fuck in, goddammit.
Oh, and as far as the Micky Knight series, get your credit card out, go buy the damn books.
Absolutely. Now, that's not available in a bundle, is it?
I know that Bold Strokes has some bundles. I believe they're ebook bundles for some of the earlier books. So you can get a deal.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that the Micky Knight ones were available like that. Awesome.
Yeah.
You can
absolutely.
get ebooks.
Yeah, that's what we push the ebooks.
Yeah, we do.
Push the ebooks a lot. So go buy the damn books because they are fantastic.
Yep, there you go. You heard it right from people I have not actually bribed.
We'll take care of that after the show, right?
Exactly. You really want this posted?
Yeah, Andy, I'll send you some Sweet Roses lime juice, okay?
Woo!
Andy'd rather have the dildos.
Hey, well, yeah. Actually, I have to work. Never mind.
All right. Well, thank you again, Jean. We really appreciate you spending some time with us and talking with us.
Yeah.
Well, thank you guys. It was a fun time.
All right.
And if you want to come back, let us know.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, yeah, maybe when the next book comes out.
Wonderful.
Unless you hate it, of course.
Oh,
I don't
yeah,
see that
right.
happening.
Yeah.
But I don't want to give away my review already.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, the book, it did suck. Okay.
She won't tell us who has cancer, so don't buy that fucking book. Just forget it.
It's Barbara. I'm telling you right now. All right.
All right.
Right. Listen, you guys take care.
Yeah, you too. Thanks.
Thanks a lot.